part 2 of Suzuki Swift rear wheel bearing change. This shows changing the rear wheel bearing using better tools. Again, we jack up the rear of the vehicle. You can hear the loud wheel bearing noise when the wheel is spun. You can see how much the rear tyre has worn due to the bad bearing. Remove the rear wheel bearing. This time we're using an impact wrench that's very powerful. This will allow access to the rear hub. The rear wheel bearing noise will be unbearable inside the car. Unbearable noise. Start tapping the cap off with a fine blade. Then switch over to an old chisel to remove the cap. The use of the fine blade reduces damage to the cap. Tap out the locking tab from the 30mm nut. If you have a powerful impact wrench, this tab will just come off. With the removal of this nut, you may need to replace the nut completely eventually. We are using this high torque impact wrench. This has a 30mm socket. It makes light work of the axle nut removal. Now we simply need to remove the hub. We find that the hub is stuck. We refit the wheel to help hub removal. The car is protected with stands as well as the jack. Heavy wheel rocking could not remove the hub. We had to hammer on this 3-jaw pillar. The hub separated, but the bearing did as well. Part of the bearing has been left on the axle. We will need to remove this part of the bearing before the new one is placed. We want to remove this part of the old bearing. We use a bearing splitter kit. The splitter is bolted to grip the part of the old bearing. We connect arms that allow the bolt to be pressed onto the axle. Winding the central bolt leads to simple removal of the broken part. This avoids damage to the axle. Back to the hub, we use circlip pliers to remove the circlip. A small bearing press is used to press out the old bearing. Last time we used a sledgehammer. A suitable socket is used to push the bearing out. We have the socket slightly smaller than the hub. A new bearing is selected and the hub is cleaned and greased. The old bearing can be used to press in the new bearing. We found that the bearing is the same either side. There was no special ABS magnetic side to the bearing. Press the new bearing down far enough to see the circlip retaining groove. When you can see the groove, you can insert the circlip. We've greased the axle. The last bearing was also greased but still stuck when it was removed. Slip on the hub with the new bearing. Oh yeah, this is a good time to check the brake pads if they're worn. We use a torque wrench set to 155 Newton meters to torque the 30mm nut. The axle nut will need to be changed as the locking tab is getting really worn out. Replace the center cap and lightly tap it in place. New quiet bearing. No wheel noise. Thanks for watching.